Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Heritage University. My name is Melissa Rogers, and I'm the Vice President of Business Development. I hope we have had the chance to meet, but if we have not, I am so excited that you've joined us. I am very proud that we have so many large associations in full attendance with all board members in attendance or registered. So thank you so much for making this a priority in your volunteerism efforts. Just to let you know, tonight we will be starting a first series of a 7-part class that we're going to host throughout the remainder of 2022. And tonight we're going to talk specifically about the role of the board, the role of the officers, and why community associations require governance. Should you have any questions as we go about tonight's presentation, feel free to put your questions in the upper right-hand corner where it says Q&A, and we will be fielding those as I communicate. And then hopefully this will be about a 40-minute presentation where there'll be plenty of time at the end. We'll do a little interactive question and answer session. So please feel free to put those questions in as they come to your mind. And as a gentle reminder, like we always do, please consult your association's attorney on any of the information that you hear tonight. We respect the fact that each community association operates under a very, very different set of governing documents, and it's very important that you all understand we are going to be talking about things in generalized totality. So please, again, reference your governing documents. You'll hear me say that a few times this evening. So I guess I don't have to introduce anybody but myself, so that's fantastic. Well, let's go ahead and get into the presentation where we're going to talk about new board members. On the next slide, we're actually going to see how easy it is, and I'm actually going to get myself acclimated as well. What we're going to learn in this particular series of new board members is information and resources that you're going to need in order to run an effective association. Just in general, how an association functions, and I apologize for the typo. And then the primary duties and responsibilities of a board of directors. So on the next slide, we're going to say, welcome brand new board members. Congratulations. You've either been elected by your membership or voluntold or appointed by your board members as an effective leader of your association. One of the most common things as a community association management company that we hear often is as you become integrated into your community, a lot of directors recognize that, wow, they had a really different perception, or they maybe didn't realize just how much commitment or information, or really how much of it runs like a corporation this was actually going to be. So it's important to note, to be a successful board member, you're going to need to know the key aspects of association leadership, which we see right there, the protection and enhancement of property values. If you've taken one of our classes before, especially anything around budgets or our treasurer's class, it is so important to understand that you're not only responsible for maintaining your asset, you're also really responsible for enhancing it so that your community's equity can continue to grow. So obviously, maintaining the quality of life within the community is also another key area of responsibility, and creating a sense of community. And ironically, most boards actually flip all of those in their direction, because your instinct as a neighbor is to create that sense of community, which is fantastic. So on the next slide, we're actually going to talk about a fantastic checklist that, I mean, literally, you can take this slide and make this into a checklist. If you are a brand new board member or a brand new volunteer, because we're going to talk heavily about committees this evening, if you are a brand new service volunteer, a complete set of the governing documents is just numero uno, okay? Number one for lots of reasons. It's really your operations book, your manual of how to operate your community. And so it's really important when I say this, we recognize a lot of boards have possibly served in other states or maybe on different capacities for-profit corporations. We are a not-for-profit, and it is very important that you take a look at how your governing documents regulate the association, because you might think it might be one way, and when you read, you actually find out it might be different, or it might confirm your original thought. So the next thing is a set of financial records. As I get the privilege of onboarding a lot of our new communities into Heritage, one of the things that I communicate the most is we can have a conversation and you can explain to me the objectives and the current operations of your association, but your association financials are going to tell me everything that I need to know and every piece of the story about your association's success. Okay. So the next thing is probably going to be very, very, normal to receive an association roster or a community directory. As a board member, you are elected to have executive knowledge. So it is perfectly acceptable for you to have access to homeowners' addresses or information so that you can have effective means of communication. A vendor list, just like association homeowners, is absolutely important. And obviously, you want to be able to have vendor contracts on file. And one of the things that we commonly get during the transition period is, oh my gosh, we don't have a copy of our contract. How are we going to get that? Not a problem. The good news is when we receive a vendor list, and if you're not even sure what your vendor list is, take a look at your governing documents, back to those financial records, and maybe your documents actually have a detailed transaction ledger where you can actually see what is being paid and to whom, and then you can contact that vendor and say, hey, I'm brand new to serving on the board, and I noticed that we don't have a current copy of our pool contract. Oh gosh, hey, I'd love to introduce myself to you and maybe be able to get a contract and better understand what your operations are for our community. That's a fantastic way to go about doing that. And we'll talk about some additional things here in a few slides. Board meeting minutes for the previous 6 months, I would even go so far as to say 12 months, if not longer, if not all of them, to be honest. It is increasingly coming to our attention that a lot of associations are not keeping effective records. And by effective records, I mean, we've fallen into this fantastic benefit of being able to work in a virtual environment. Previously, we were restricted by covenants that maybe didn't allow us to do electronic communication. And now, unfortunately, COVID-19 has changed business law for us to be able to conduct that way. And some associations have totally forgotten to take those email actions and actually put them into association meeting minutes. So something to keep in mind, the record of your association are your board meeting minutes. Everything else, that's not really the record of the association. You've got to look at these legal documents. Okay, so the monthly association calendar, especially if you're an active community or you've got a lot of committees, this might be very valuable for you to have. Okay, so the last ones are, I think, probably the most important things, in addition to having the privilege of working with a professional management company, okay? Not every association has that value or that benefit. They might financially not be in a position to do that, or not feel like they can justify it to their association. But what I can tell you is the Roberts Rules of Order is what governs the parliamentary procedure for how you as board of directors are supposed to conduct business. So it is absolutely important that you understand the key basics of Robert's Rules of Order. Now, granted, not everything applies to community association management. And so along with a copy of tonight's slideshow, We're also going to be able to provide you a great glossary terms list so that if this is your first time serving and some of these words that I'm utilizing might be foreign to you, this is going to be a great spreadsheet for you to be able to have and say, oh, that's exactly what that definition is. I've heard that before. Thank you for clarifying the distinction. And we're also going to give you a summary of Robert's Rules of Order as it pertains to running association meetings. Okay, so you guys did a great thing by signing up today. All right, so obviously, you also need to have a healthy understanding of the role of the board and what it means to govern the association. And then again, like I said, if you do have that privilege, you need to understand the role of the manager and the management company and how they complement your association's operations. And then if you have that partnership, just as we were talking about, looking at the meeting minutes of the association, also take a look at the management reports, because oftentimes your management report is really going to be the beefy part where you've got the discussion and the conversation going behind the scenes, and that allows your board meeting minutes to just record the actions that are taken at the meeting. It's fantastic, okay? On the next slide, we're going to talk about, all right, that's great. Here's a fantastic checklist of a whole bunch of stuff that I have to do now. How do I even go about getting this information? Well, I told you earlier about how we, as professional management, would recommend introducing yourself to vendors to go ahead and get that information from them if maybe you don't have that already. Hold a board member orientation program about how associations do business, or specifically your association. Invite the association's vendors to talk about their roles, exactly what we just talked about in the slide before. Check the availability of leadership seminars available for your management company, from your management company, or from those offered by Community Associations Institute. So first and foremost, you already know about Heritage University, which is fantastic. And so as a management company, we are so excited that we can provide this value to you at no cost. And if you didn't know, we do all of this, and you don't have to be a homeowner, you don't have to be a board member, and you don't have to be a Heritage client. Community Associations Institute is our international affiliate on education for both homeowner leaders, community managers, vendors in our industry, and management companies. So if you've not had the privilege of getting acclimated with any of the CAI information, we've provided those links for you at the bottom of this slide. And we are also happy to have a very active Georgia chapter, which is fantastic. So the last thing that you can do, or one of the last things that you can do, is research the internet for useful, accessible, and relevant information. A lot of times board members ask us, wow, how did you find that information? And oftentimes our answer is, we Googled it. And you'd be surprised how many fantastic draft resolutions are out there, so that you have a heads up on how you can draft association business. Anyway, obviously you need to get your attorney involved for specific things, but there are some good resources and tools out there on the internet, specifically on Community Associations Institute website, CAI. Their website has a ton of stuff for items like this. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about what information do you need in order to be a successful leader for your community. Oh, I already did this one. Sorry, that was me. I moved backwards instead of forwards. On the next slide, we're going to talk about how can you make your first 100 days a success, right? So just like the president has a 100-day success plan, we want to be able to empower you to have that declaration to your association if that's something that you're interested in providing, or just behind the scenes, giving you an organizational tactic to be able to align your board members, okay? So new board members should avoid rash, uniformed decisions, okay, uninformed decisions. I would actually even go so far to say uniform decisions, because there needs to be healthy debate between conversation. There needs to be a good exploration of topics. You might be in alignment, but as long as there's debate, and you might be not in alignment, but be able to make that decision. I think it's very important that you consider this very first thing. In addition to this, rash decision making, that really implies an emotional response potentially. And I want to acknowledge that all of you in the audience are homeowners first. And by being a leader or desiring to be a leader within your community, it can oftentimes be incredibly difficult to separate the professional aspect of running a corporation business and being a neighbor. So, if anything, one of the big values that partnering with management can provide for you is that ability to allow resources so that you can encourage and educate your board members so things like this don't happen on the onset. Okay, nobody's perfect, but hopefully this is going to be a really great roadmap for everyone. Keep an open mind and encourage participation and involvement. This we know, hopefully we know. Don't become a single issue board member. Be collaborative. Work collectively. This is a really big example that we get a lot. Oh, I'm the member at large, and I only decided to join the community board because I want to know what's happening with the pool, and I only want to be involved when it comes to things with the pool. While we appreciate your dedication to that specific topic, maybe being on a committee might serve you better than being on the board, because being a board member, even a member at large board member, does require you to be informed and help make decisions on all fronts of association business. All right, talk with your association members. And one of the things about talking with your association members, let me limit this if I can. I want you to have this fantastic relationships with prior board members or current committee members and current board members, but I don't want you to feel like you are responsible as a former board member for having to download every single little thing. That should be something that as we go through this, you're going to recognize, and hopefully you're already doing it already, that you can keep very good records yourself that you can very easily turn over to a future member. If you are a heritage partner, we partner with Vanica, which is fantastic because everything that we have, we house electronically. And again, it's specifically there with the mind and the intent that we want your future volunteers to be able to see why you made the decisions that you did and have access to educate themselves on their time, not yours. Obviously, if you want to make yourself available, we absolutely recommend that. But I want you to have that good temperance and boundary there, okay? Act in the best interest of the community and conduct yourself in a business-like manner, very similarly to what we said about the first square. Maintain a positive attitude and become a positive influence for others. For some, this might be incredibly easy because gifts or acts of service, I should say, might be a primary love language. If those of you who know what I'm talking about with the 5 love languages, it might just come easy for you. This doesn't necessarily come easy for other people. And so especially being a board member, which can sadly be a thankless job from time to time or often, it's very important that maintaining morale within the key central decision makers, just like it would be for your professional team or your family. It's so important that you try to give each other as much encouragement as possible and try to maintain that positive, active influence to the community. One of the things that we try to encourage at Heritage, other than being proactive in communication, is to really try to take the best opportunity to find a positive in most situations, depending on the circumstance, and be able to present that to homeowners to clarify things. So taking this particular item is very, very important. Assist in establishing goals and objectives for the association, seek out ways to actively involve members in committees, community events, and recreational programs. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit more. Just because you've been elected to the board doesn't mean the buck stops there. The association still has the ability to get involved even if they were not elected, okay? And we'll talk about that in more detail. On the next slide, we are going to talk about new board members and the education aspect, okay? So this is an important slide to keep note of. We kind of mentioned this earlier, but new board members appreciate training and the availability of useful information to make their time on the board a success. Easing the transition for new board members can be the deciding factor on how well ongoing operations of an association are handled by the board, committees, and management company. This supports exactly what I was just talking about. And I often have conversations where I hear they're flustered and there's a lot of things that they have areas of opportunity to correct or instill different behavior, and they're just spent. And the homeowners know that they're spent. And that is a really tough position to be in, because correcting that means that you have to present yourself, even though you're spent, you have to present yourself as being on the board and serving is the best thing. I enjoy it. It's flexible, because you are looking to attract more engagement. And who wants to run for a board when you look like you haven't slept in 8 days, you know, or like you're a new parent for the first time? That can be very stressful. If you're stressed, you're probably showing other people that they don't want to be stressed. So it's this vicious cycle. And again, this is something that property management or having a partnership with professional management can kind of help you and guide you with. We talked about rookie mistakes before, but rookie mistakes by board members, learning by trial and error, reinventing the wheel, these are all considered non-productive. And listen, we have the respective understanding that not every board that came before you was the greatest, okay? And you might actually be serving because you do have to reinvent the wheel or realign the wheel, so to speak. That's not necessarily what we're talking about in this instance. What we're talking about is if there's a great board resolution that's in place and it's working and the association is complying or advocating for it, then there is no need to make an alteration to it. There's no need to reinvent that wheel, essentially, okay? And technically, as we're about to see in a couple more slides, the courts in the state of Georgia, they really don't care that this is the first time that you've served or that you're learning by trial and error. You're actually held to a very high standard. And so it's very important that you take the time to orient yourself and you open avenues of communication with your board members and your community. It's absolutely vital, okay? So on the next slide, we're going to talk about the role of a homeowner. So a lot of times, and if you haven't already received this as a board member, we're also going to include this as an additional handout. But CAI, as we referenced earlier, came out with this fantastic resource last year, and it delineates so simply the responsibilities of a homeowner and the rights of a homeowner, the responsibilities of a community leader and the rights of a community leader. And it's a fantastic document. This is going to kind of summarize it in a little bit, but in application to what we're talking about tonight and serving on the board, the role of the homeowner has the basic authority in a community association, period, the end. You are the stakeholders, right? However, the ownership elects the board of directors to act on their behalf. So a lot of times we hear from boards that, oh my gosh, we don't have quorum. Everybody in the community, you know, they don't participate. And sometimes the apathetic vote, which some associations are actually seeking out right now, but sometimes the apathetic vote is actually just means of telling you you're doing a great job, because that's exactly what your homeowners have elected you to do. They have elected you to worry about the business affairs of the association. And unless there's a special assessment or an increase to the budget, they think you're doing a great job, okay? So just something to keep in mind, the apathy within your community is not always a bad thing, but sometimes it does absolutely need to be addressed. So the governing documents usually delegate almost all the community association's decision-making powers are with the board of directors. And your decision-making powers as a board of director, which you'll find in your glossary terms, comes from the bylaws of the association. Okay, so I've referenced governing documents, I've referenced CC&Rs in the declaration. CC&Rs, and governing documents, with the exception of the bylaws, are all the same thing. Okay, those are the master deed, the rules, the restrictions of your association. The bylaws govern the board of directors and more than likely committee operations and activities as well. So typically homeowners only have the voting power to elect and remove directors and then amend any of the governing documents for the association. Okay, and we're speaking specifically the declaration, the CC&Rs, or the bylaws. Okay, board resolutions are there, and we put that exception there because board resolutions can absolutely be adopted by the board and still serve interest for the association so long as it does not conflict. Okay, so as a result, and I'm sure you've probably pre-read this before I'm going to say it out loud, but as a result, it may be necessary for you to stress the following point with your owners from time to time. If you don't like a board decision, they usually don't have any authority to veto or undo the board's action, right? Because again, they've elected you. Under such conditions, their only remedy is to elect a new board to represent them. So very rarely do we see board upheaval where there's a special meeting called by the ownership, although it does happen, okay? But what I'd like to point out about this particular portion is a lot of times you get that outspoken 3% of your association, or maybe just that one homeowner that's just incredibly vocal, even though they know the correct information. A lot of times, professional management makes recommendations to board members, if you haven't already done this yourself, hey, homeowner Smith, I see that you are incredibly passionate about this gate access. We'd really like to be able to explore this a little bit further. And since you have such passion or maybe even knowledge, would you be interested in possibly creating a committee or being a committee to assist the board, or even run for the board yourself? It does two things. One, it engages that particular homeowner and hopefully de-escalates the situation, or two, it de-escalates the situation and then you don't hear from them again, hopefully. Anyway, all right, next slide. We're going to talk about the role of the board members now, or the board of directors. So to form an effective board, directors must have clear understanding of the strengths and the weaknesses of the association. Again, understanding your association financials are a reality, not a wish list, okay? Its history and what is to be accomplished. Every homeowner association should have responsibility for its assets, as well as its operation in accordance with standards established by the state and federal laws, local ordinances, and the governing documents upon which the entity itself was created. And actually, if you look at that, you now see the hierarchy of documents. The governing documents, which is the recorded land record, the rules and restrictions for those particular parcels. Then the local land, ordinances by the city or the municipality, okay? And then you've got the state and the federal laws. That's, just so that you understand, this is where your set of governing documents is in hierarchy. And it doesn't mean that it's any less important. It just means that it is a true legal document. To the extent that the association has such authority and control, it's the board of directors that makes certain these responsibilities are fulfilled. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about the behaviors and authority. So from what we were just speaking about, this slide in very great detail. And again, thankfully, you're going to get a copy of this. You're not going to have to listen to me say these two things in great detail, but this really talks about the behavior of the board of directors and the authority in which that they have to regulate and govern your association. All right. On the next slide, we're going to list the key responsibilities of being a board of director, okay? We talk about in other circumstances, and I've mentioned this in prior board trainings, the board speaks in one voice, okay? So as I alluded to earlier, we want there to be healthy debate. And let's just say it's a split decision that, you know, it's 3-4-2 against. You happen to be the board member that voted against. It is not appropriate, nor is it professional, for you to have a conversation with your next door neighbor and say, oh yeah, the pool project was approved, but I did not vote for it. And you want to know why I didn't vote for it? Let me tell you why I didn't vote for it. That is not acceptable business conduct. And that doesn't come from your governing documents. That comes from the Roberts Rules of Order and hopefully common sense. But with that being said, you need to establish a very uniformed approach to the community that is completely one voice. So one person cannot act on behalf of the others. So acting through the board as a whole, enforce the documents, which you'll see this bullet point again here in a second, establish sound fiscal policies and maintain accurate records. Remember when we said don't reinvent the wheel? You don't need to recreate fiscal policies that are already created. Look at your governing documents. It outlines your assessment procedure, it outlines your collection procedure, and it outlines your fining authority if you have it. Not all association documents have that capability, but if you do, then it is important to make sure that those finding resolutions are completed so that your management company understands how they can proceed and your homeowners have a healthy expectation as to what the repercussions are in the event that they don't meet the requirements of their responsibilities in your association. Develop a workable budget and keep in mind the needs and the requirements and the expectations of the community. Okay, it's very, very important to remember. A budget is a live, breathing document, okay? It can be changed throughout the year. I say that with an asterisk. Again, take a look at your governing documents, but most governing documents allow for that to be the case. Establish reserve funds, because remember what we said, it's not just your responsibility to maintain, it's also your responsibility to enhance. Act on budget items and determine assessment rates. Collect assessments. Establish, publicize, and enforce rules and penalties. That's enforce the documents, establish sound fiscal policies. Very important. Authorize legal action against homeowners who do not comply with the rules. I recognize that a lot of you like to take the neighborly approach and we really don't want to have to go against people that have a balance or even a large balance, and now it gets carried away. You are not doing your association or your neighbors any favors by not complying with the capabilities that are outlined for you by law. Okay, the judges and the courts are looking very heavily on that. And so please be very careful. Consult your association's attorney when you're talking about creating policies like this, because it's a very important that you have good defense for this. And again, you seek your association's declaration. There's no need to hem and haw over certain things. All right, so make sure that you definitely review local laws. A lot of times homeowners like to update their design guidelines and then they put in approvals that conflict with the regulations by the city or municipality, which is what they need to get the permit from. So make sure that those are in alignment so you don't confuse your homeowners and you don't upset them. Appoint committees and delegate authority. We definitely know that it's difficult sometimes to even get homeowners to run for the board of directors, but we really want to make sure that even though you have been elected to make the decisions, we still want you to engage the voice and the pulse of the community in which you are governing. Okay, select an attorney, an auditor, an insurance agent, all of the professional people that you need in order to assist your association's requirements. Provide adequate insurance coverage as required in your governing documents in local government agencies. If you did not know this, your governing documents almost always have a regulation or a requirement for the type of insurance that you're required to maintain. Inform board members of all business items that require their vote, okay? Again, members at large are included in this unless your governing documents state otherwise, but for the most part they do. See that the association is protected from acts of all parties with fiscal responsibilities. Attend and participate at meetings. I cannot tell you how many times we have board members that tell us so-and-so is not attending the meeting, and all we need them to do is just help out. We need to share the load a little bit. You know, they got elected for the pool. Now that they're working on the pool and that project's been done, they no longer show up meetings. Please don't be that board member. Okay, I know you won't be. All right, on the next slide. I know this all seems like a lot. That was like a really big checklist, and that wasn't even all of them, right? We didn't even touch on the HR responsibilities or the, other things that might come into play. But operating a homeowners association carries with it many of the very same duties and responsibilities of overseeing any other type of business. Okay, the only difference is there's no profit. Okay. Serving as a board member is a valuable and rewarding experience that should be undertaken by those who see it as an opportunity to serve their fellow members while protecting and enhancing their assets of the community. See how this is a continuing topic, protecting and enhancing. It is serious business, but it's also a task that it's worth doing well in order to safeguard the investments of all. We've all seen the horrible tragedy that took place in Florida with the Southside property and Surfside, property. And we just really are trying to do our very best to make sure that you all have access to making sure that decisions are well informed. So hopefully you can avoid situations such as that. All right, on the next slide, we're going to talk about the officers of the association. So you're like, wait a minute, we just talked about the board members. Isn't that the officers? Well, for those of you that are new to serving on your board, the owners of or the membership of your community, okay, they elect the board of directors. But the board of directors within yourselves, the 3, the 5, the 7, the 9, the 23 of you, okay, you actually amongst yourselves elect or appoint the officer positions, okay? And we're going to see that here at the very bottom, that each association typically has a president, secretary, treasurer, and may have one or more vice presidents or members at large. I should have put that in there too. However, an association may officially conduct business with fewer officers than these, depending on the laws of the given state. Remember, I said you may have served in a different state prior. Please try to expel your preconceived notions and your prior experiences when making all business decisions for these current affairs. Okay, the association acts through its officers and its agents, okay? The board of directors makes the policies for the association, as we talked about, but it's the officers and the agents that carry out these policies and administrative functions for the community, okay? Some of the officers are clerical, okay? Others carry out substantive functions based on the policies established by the board of directors, okay? And so all officers have an affirmative obligation to act in the utmost good faith of the association and cannot deal in funds or the property of the association to their own self-advantage. That is very important. Most of you know that is, please have no conflicts of interest. And if so, you must disclose them and you must recuse yourself if there is any discussion or vote therein. All right, next slide. Now we're going to talk individually about each officer role, okay? The president of an association is vested with all of the powers generally given to the CEO of a corporation. You are a corporation. While specific bylaw provisions may vary the president's duties, it is generally presumed that he or she will, 1, preside at all meetings of the board and the membership, not your management company and not your manager. That's the role of the board president. The president will execute contracts, orders, and other documents in the name of the association as its agent. Oftentimes the secretary will do that as well. Sometimes the treasurer will be a double signatory in those circumstances. Notice here also, the management company is not named here. Management companies should not execute contracts on behalf of the association. We are an acting agent only in a vendor, administrative, and assistive capacity, okay? So please make sure that you understand that distinction. The president also assumes general charge of the day-to-day administration of the association and has the authority to order specific actions in furtherance of the board's policies, i.e., to hire a management company to procure the administration and assist with the operations of the association's day-to-day. Okay, so the president, lastly, and this is really important. Generally speaking, we talked about the board needing to speak in one voice. This is the exclusion where oftentimes, just like a chair for a committee, the board president often is the speaker or the representation of the board in totality, okay? And so it's very important that in addition to the other board members, the board president understands the roles and the requirements for this particular requirement. Like all officers of the association, the president has an affirmative duty to carry out the responsibilities of the office in the best interests of the association. Unless otherwise specified in governing documents, the president serves at the will of the board of directors and can be removed with or without cause at any time by a majority of the full board. Generally, your governing documents, and again, take a look at your bylaws to make sure that that is or is not what yours say. But I want you to pay very close attention. I did not say from the board. I just said from the position of an officer. Remember, the association membership elects the board of directors. The board of directors then elect or appoint themselves the officer positions. So unless the association votes to completely remove the board, that particular board member still is an active member that has voting or may not have voting rights actually, but they are still on the board of directors. So definitely make sure you consult your attorney on any of those, especially if you're having some issues with people not rotating positions. We want there to be a healthy exchange. Even if you are a longtime service member, we want you to explore the other positions of the board unless it really, really requires you presiding as the president all the time. All right, next slide, we're going to talk about the vice president. Not all declarations or bylaws require a vice president. In fact, most don't, although we love having vice presidents because they can oftentimes be incredibly effective when somebody's on vacation or when somebody's non-responsive, okay? The vice president is vested with all the powers which are required to perform the duties of the association president, but only in the absence of the president, okay? And there has to be communication effectively to all board members that this is what's transpiring and the reason why. The vice president does not automatically possess inherent powers to act in the capacity of the CEO and may only act as such when the president is absent. And so again, this is very important. I know we kind of double stated it right there, but it's very, very important. There's a lot of people that think it's a de facto. It is not. It must be communicated appropriately. The vice president may assume such additional duties that are defined by the board of directors. Oftentimes we see the vice president will chair a substantive committee like that of the architectural control or a landscaping committee for your community. So these are vital things that can be incredibly helpful. But like I said, vice president can be very, very impactful for a community, especially when other members of the board of directors maybe are desiring not to participate as much or are going silent. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about the secretary, which if you've done a class with me before, I've said this and I'll continue to say it. This is my favorite role on the board of directors, and I know it's probably for all of you in the audience the scariest, and you might have snickered a smidge. The good news is we've got some great resources for you on how to take meeting minutes. We've got some great resources on an agenda draft for you, so don't be dismayed if this is your first time serving. We are going to put you in really good hands, so don't fear being the secretary. You are the corporate seal of the operations of the corporation. How cool is that? I know that sounds like a big weight, but that is. You should feel very empowered by that. The secretary of the association is responsible for keeping and maintaining a record of all meetings of the board. Okay, we have established this, and the membership, and is the custodian for most, if not all, of the official records of the association. The only asterisk out of that would be the financials from the treasurer. Okay, so this is really important. The position of the secretary is not simply a clerical one, okay? The secretary's most important responsibility is keeping the minutes of the association, and I cannot stress to you enough. We are hearing so many more boards tell us and experience that when they go back to take a look at meeting minutes, they don't have them. Please don't be that board, and if you are that board, please let us know. We would love to be able to help you, okay? As the custodian for the minutes and the other official records of the association, the secretary is responsible for ensuring access to those records by the members of the association and their authorized representatives. So again, think about it like this. When there's a proxy, it goes to, a lot of people have the default be the secretary, okay? So this is, there's more weight to it than just being responsible for board meeting minutes. On the next slide, we're going to talk about the treasurer, okay? And most of you know what the treasurer, or can identify what a treasurer might be responsible for, which is the custodian of the funds, securities, and financial records of the association. When the association has a manager or a management company that handles the funds, the treasurer's duties include overseeing the appropriate people to ensure that this is being done. So you actually have a nice transfer of power, and Vanica allows that fantastic regulation and oversight of transparency. So way to go, treasurer. That's awesome. Same thing with you, secretary. There's a lot of things that we do in your role that we help take off your shoulders, which is just a great value and a benefit for partnering with professional management. Again, unless otherwise specified, the treasurer is responsible for coordinating the development of the annual budget, which we talked about. And if you do have the privilege of partnering with professional management or you're a heritage partner, we are actually going to do that initial budget for you. We are going to put our professional recommendations as a licensed expert, so to speak, and we are going to provide what we believe is in the best interest of your community. And treasurer and finance committee and board of directors, do with it what you will. Once you've approved it, again, we provide simply just the recommendations. You have the authority to make those alterations and approvals within the association. Unless your governing documents require the association to approve the budget, most associations have board approved budgets. So treasurer, this is probably your big responsibility, other than communicating the status of the financials for the association at your State of the Union or your annual meeting. Okay, that is the responsibility. And in fact, if you're not having an election or there's no quorum for your election, most annual meetings are just a conveyance of the financial position of the association. That's generally the only main requirement other than election. So treasurer, we set you up for a lot of success, but most of what you do is heavily surrounded about communicating that financial position to the ownership in ways that they can understand and digest. As with the association secretary, we just talked about this. There's value when you're able to pass some of these delegations over to a management company. Okay. On the next slide, we're going to start to talk about the roles and responsibilities of committees and why they are so important and what I believe to be incredibly vital for an association. Okay. Usually, a community association's bylaws will definitely name committees or the availability for appointment. Some of these roles are to assist the board. And again, I want to make sure that you understand committees do not have the ability to make decisions unless you're an architectural control board that has that authority delineated in the declaration. Most other, that to my knowledge, one of the only exclusions is the only committee that has the authority to make a decision. Your responsibility in participating on a committee is to help engage the association's temperature or their thought process on that particular topic, and to gather this information and provide a recommendation to the board of directors. Okay. On the next slide, we're going to talk about the different types of committees. All right. So there's a mandatory committee. And these are lovely and nicely spelled out for you, is one that is required by your governing documents. So we were just talking about that. That would be your ARC committee or your modification committee or your architectural control committee, lots of different names for the same thing. Oftentimes we see this a lot with elections and nominations as well in the bylaws. So make sure you definitely look at both your governing documents declaration and your bylaws when you're looking at standing committees. Mandatory committees, excuse me. A standing committee is often used in addition to mandatory committees. You just don't realize that that's what they are. Standing committees are appointed at the discretion of the board of directors when needed, and they meet a basic need for the association, but oftentimes they're habitual, meaning they happen maybe every calendar year or maybe every other calendar year. They're pretty consistent, all right? They're maybe not outlined in your declaration, but it is something that is consistently beneficial by having that. That's what a standing committee is. The last type of committee is an ad hoc committee, and you may have seen that often as well, or maybe have served or experienced that in another capacity. But this is where it's appointed by the board of director on one specific topic, okay? So regardless of a standing committee or an ad hoc committee, the board needs to create a resolution, oftentimes a charter, to establish the mission statement, the meeting schedule, the responsibilities, and what the ownership is going to receive as a result of their volunteer efforts, okay? That's what a charter and a resolution can provide when talking with committees. It offers very, very clear and succinct responsibility delineations from committee members and board members, but I will tell you, they do oftentimes emulate bylaws, okay? All right, on the next slide, we're going to see successful guidelines for committees, okay? So successful committees tend to operate within the following guidelines. They serve at the pleasure and discretion at the board of directors, and they understand that they are only in an advisory capacity. Any committee with independent authority, such as the architectural standards, has an appeals process to permit access to the board as an ultimate authority for community associations. So this is fantastic. Every association, whether you choose to, it's required in your declaration or not, there's oftentimes never an opportunity where you should say no to a hearing request from your board, from your homeowner. They need to have the right to be heard in a specific capacity. The committees have specific job descriptions which outline their roles and responsibilities. That's that charter that I was talking about. And the committees keep minutes of their meetings and highlight their recommendations to the board. How many of you are serving on a committee and did not realize that you have to keep meeting minutes? You are just an extension of the board of directors. You are working on their discretion, which is why the bylaws often are emulated when creating those community charters for specific committees. All right, so this is our last slide of the night, and then we're going to go ahead and get to questions. Duty of care and duty of loyalty. As a board of director, you are tasked with these two main things. Most of you hear it as there's a fiscal, or I mean, not fiscal, excuse me, a fiduciary responsibility, okay? That F word gets tossed around a whole bunch. Fiduciary responsibility is implied, friends. It's very much so implied, okay? But the duty of care and the duty of loyalty is further explaining really what that means, okay? And that means the fiduciary relationship imposes obligations of trust and confidence in favor of the corporation and its members. It requires the members of the board to act in good faith in the best interests of the members of the association. Remember, we talked about the whole community, not just one person's thought, okay? It means that board members must exercise due care and diligence when acting for the community, and it requires them to act within the scope of their authority. You cannot amend the declaration by board resolution. You have to go through the legal process of amending your declaration or your bylaws. The fact that the association is a not-for-profit corporation, or that the members essentially are board member volunteers that are unpaid, it does not relieve them from the high standards of trust and responsibility that the fiduciary relationship requires. Remember, I talked to you about this with the judges right now. When a member accepts the position on the board of directors, he or she is presumed to have knowledge of the duties and responsibilities of a board member. Again, I'm so glad you are joining us for this series because this shows initiative. Pat yourself on the back. All right. Board members cannot, oh, I already said, each board must recognize the fiduciary relationship and the responsibilities that you have to the association and the members, okay? The board's duties must be performed with the same care and responsibility. And this is what the court's definition is. An ordinary, prudent person would exercise under similar circumstances. That's the explanation right there. And the ultimate responsibilities of these unique positions cannot be delegated to a manager, a management company, or a third party. All right. I know we did a lot of information. We are really at an hour. I was hoping to get finished a little bit faster than this. I do thank you so much. For those of you that would like to stay around for the question and answer session, I would love it if you could, but if you do have to leave, please don't be dismayed. We will certainly make sure that you have access to the questions and the answers that transpire today. So I am going to go ahead and get queued up with your first question, which, let me go ahead and bring my screen over. Okay. If the owners don't like a board's decision, can they bring 2/3 majority from the community to turn over the board's decision? That's a very specific question right there, or set of questions. 2/3, you might be kind of relating that to the Georgia Property Owners Act, maybe. So it depends on what specifically your association's governing documents say to remove the board of directors, or really it's to call a special meeting of the ownership. And you need to actually take a look. You might actually be required to get a petition. You might be required to do some other things when requesting that special meeting. So great question. But that's all, again, going to determine what your governing documents actually say. And it looks like, I think this is actually possibly our last question of the evening. If you do have any other questions, please feel free to ask them. But, oh, we have one more, excuse me. Can a board member be the president, secretary, and treasurer as well? or do they have to be separate? I'm so glad that you asked this question, whomever you were, because I meant to delineate this on that slide. No is the answer, and yes is the answer. Right now, board members can only serve in single capacity. Okay, so really you shouldn't be sharing the responsibilities. But the two officer positions that can never be shared, never, ever, ever, is the board president and the board secretary. Those must be two separate individuals, okay? So I recognize that some of your communities have that one faithful board member that's just trying to do everything to keep the ship afloat. You are exonerated from that. And I'm sure your association's attorney is talking to you about ways to call for volunteers so that you can get more people serving for the board, or hopefully maybe you have some people that you could possibly appoint. So please never put yourself in a position, and if you find yourself in a position of a one-person board member showdown, please do everything that you possibly can to put out that call for volunteers. Okay. Great question again. Thank you again for asking it. All right. How do you manage the lack of interest in running for the board and very low no community participation? This is due to the majority of homes being rentals. Welcome to 2022, and I so feel you on that question. I think this is a multifaceted question because let's face it, I hate to bring this example up, but it's the truth, okay? That Geico commercial about Karen did not do anything for homeowners associations in a positive light. In fact, you know, we took on tremendous ridicule from that, and CAI actually did release a public statement about that, trying to defend our position. So first and foremost, know that we are negatively, your position, negatively looked upon by owners, yet it is the fastest growing business model in the United States, just so that you know, okay? That being said, COVID-19 happened and welcomed us into 2020, and just general psychology and people's morale, our amygdalas were on overdrive. Maybe for some people in the service industry are still on overdrive. So now we're dealing with, okay, people who have a negative perception of what we do. Maybe they're already getting, hey friend, please refresh your pine straw or your mulch and your flowering bed notice, and that's already making them prickly. Then coupled with they're angry for multiple reasons, okay, and they feel helpless, and so a lot of times they inadvertently direct negative attention towards running for the board or areas of opportunity where, again, like I said, they could choose to turn that negative opinion into volunteering and changing. We are starting to see a lot of board members have this no nonsense policy, okay? We are starting to see them say, if you don't want to be part of the solution, stop being part of the problem. And I'm really proud of that particular association that stood up that way, because it is so tremendously important. That's not at all to be dismissive of your homeowners in any way, shape, or form. But remember what I said. If you yourself as a board member are promoting that you're stressed, you don't like the position that you're serving in, you're going to have a very hard time turning the tide to the community and selling them on volunteering when you don't want to, okay? And so again, maybe recognize changing your perception or your the association's perception of you and how you as a board are advocating for the association. Another thing that you can choose to do is potentially, and I know this may sound cringeworthy to some of you, host some town hall meetings. Even though your bylaws may require only one meeting a year of the ownership, that doesn't mean that special meetings of just conversation cannot be provided. I know a lot of associations are starting to use surveys and polling just to gain temperature of the association. I want to let you know that the role of the renter is coming into spotlight, okay? And we are seeing legislation and some things that are going in the favor of the investor, okay? And that's because new building and construction is a primary need right now. There are so many houses that are needed and not enough that are built. So it's kind of this really interesting combination that's just cascading, if you will. And for those of you in the audience, if you didn't know, it was 2026, I was told. We've got the FIFA Cup coming to Atlanta. And so very similarly to what we felt for the Super Bowl and those short-term rentals, I have a feeling we're going to have some of those conversations revisited. And so the only thing that I can say when it comes to the rental situation, if you are a common law homeowners association and you have not had the opportunity to engage your legal counsel about adopting the Property Owners Act for Georgia, I sincerely encourage you to do so. If you are a Heritage partner, we would be more than happy to give you information about it, but this is definitely something that you could use as a strategy to be able to help with the restrictions potentially with rentals, because in most HOA governing documents, you are held to the Georgia Nonprofit Corporation Code, where the POA and the Condo Act are held to state statute. So there are different capabilities for you in that. So again, it is a legal process, so you will have to engage an attorney, but that could be something that you could do in addition to advocating or trying to promote activity within your association. Obviously, I talked about having proactive communication whenever possible. Obviously, giving your homeowners the ability to have that conversation. Again, those town halls, so important. If nothing less, just an opportunity for them to feel heard. Again, town halls don't allow for any decision-making authority. It's just a conversation, okay? So that might be a great thing for you to do. And I know that sounds like, oh, wow, that's more of my time that I have to do. If you are having an issue where a lack of interest in volunteerism is a big concern, you might want to consider reprioritizing your efforts for the community in trying to change that focus, okay? And we would love to be able to help you with that. So, and we completely understand the rental situation. It's a very, very fast-paced and changing environment. So hold on alongside with us. We are going to do our very best to provide you education and access to vendors that can help you navigate this process. So we completely hear you. And I think that concludes our questions for tonight. So thank you again for those of you who stayed. Our next class is going to cover the topic of working with a professional management company and how to effectively run association meetings. So thank you. If you have stayed for this entire seminar, I hope you've learned something great that you can take back to your board. Again, feel free to share this information with friends or those that you think would find value from this. There's nothing really proprietary on this. We really want you to be very, very successful in leading your community. So we appreciate that you've given us this opportunity. We have a fantastic YouTube page if you are interested in taking a glance at any of our previously recorded classes. And then we have a great calendar coming up for the rest of the year. So I just want to tell you, we have board training classes ready and available for you every 2 weeks for the next 6 months. You're welcome. I'm so excited. We really want to make sure that you have as much access to this information as possible. And all you have to do is register. If you're not able to join me live like this in this environment, no problem. if you register, you'll be able to get that playback opportunity and all of the resources that we talk about, okay? And as we continue to go through this series, there's going to be additional materials that we're going to provide to you. So please make sure that you keep on the lookout for all of our communication. We're also going to be doing treasurer's training next month and budget boot camp for all of you coming up in the month of August. So I'm super excited about all of those upcoming classes as well. So we've got a lot for you to remain engaged. Please let us know how we can make that a reality for you. And if you have the opportunity, my email address is right there. I'd love to hear your feedback. If this was helpful for you, please take the moment to let me know. If you've got any suggestions about some upcoming classes or content that you would like to hear more information about, I'm super interested in learning what that would be for you as well. So please take that opportunity to engage with us when you have the opportunity. And I thank you so much. Again, thank you so much to my production team who made this evening a reality. And I look forward to seeing you all again in the audience very soon.